but not least, Mr. Stephen Solomon, Principal Legal Officer at the WHO. With this, I'm handing over to the Director General for the opening remarks.
Thank you, Christian. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's a pleasure to be joined today by my friend Charles Michel, President of the European Council. President Michel has championed the call for an international treaty to make the world better prepared to respond to pandemics and health crises. Thank you so much, President Michel. This powerful idea of a treaty rooted in WHO has resulted in the joint statement issued today and published in major newspapers around the world and in multiple languages, which has been signed so far by 25 heads of state and heads of government. They represent a diversity of countries from north and south, east and west. It's now 425 days since I declared COVID-19 a global health emergency. In that time, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought out the best and worst in humanity. We have seen acts of incredible courage from health workers and from communities around the world on a daily basis. But the pandemic has also thrived amid the inequalities in our societies, the geopolitical fault lines in our world, and the frayed trust in our public institutions. It has exposed the gaps in national, regional, and global preparedness and response systems, but also allowed us to identify opportunities to strengthen the international health architecture. The time to act is now. The world cannot afford to wait until the pandemic is over to start planning for the next one. We must not allow the memories of this crisis to fade and go back to business as usual. The impacts on our societies, economies, and health, especially for the poor and the most vulnerable, are too significant. We cannot do things the way we have done them before and expect a different result. We must act boldly. Without an internationally coordinated, all of government, all of society, One Health approach to pandemic preparedness and response, we remain vulnerable. It has shown how much we need a universal commitment to basic public health principles as the foundation for our work to prevent, detect, and respond to epidemic and pandemic threats. The idea behind the proposal for such a treaty is to systematically tackle the gaps exposed by COVID-19. The world has come together as never before to take on this crisis. Now, we must leverage the new opportunities for global cooperation and innovation. This treaty would strengthen the implementation of the international health regulations, and critically, it would also provide a framework for international cooperation and solidarity. The key issues it would address could include building resilience to pandemics and other global health emergencies with robust national and global preparedness systems, ensuring timely and equitable access to pandemic countermeasures, including vaccines, supporting sustainable funding and capacity for prevention, detection, and responses to outbreaks, and promote mutual trust. The treaty, which could be taken forward by the World Health Assembly, would be based on the WHO Constitution, including the principles of health for all and no discrimination or non-discrimination. Ultimately, of course, how such a treaty is developed and what it looks like and whether it's ratified is a matter for our member states, the nations of the world. We must leave a legacy for our children, a safer world for all. Now, I am pleased to give the floor to my good friend, President Charles Michel. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you, Tedros. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Today, we are calling for an international treaty on pandemics. The COVID-19 pandemic is indeed much more than just a health issue. It has cut across every sector of our societies, highlighting our strength and exposing our weaknesses. And above all, it has taught us one brutal lesson: no country, no continent can defeat a pandemic alone. It requires a global approach, the us rather than the me, and a collective commitment at the highest political level. The next pandemic is not a question of if, but when. So we must be ready, and we have no time to waste. This treaty on pandemics would be rooted in the Constitution of the World Health Organization. It will support the principle of health for all. And through this treaty, our main goal is to foster a comprehensive approach to better predict, prevent, and respond to pandemics, to strengthen global capacities and resilience, to ensure fair access to medical solutions, and to bolster international alert systems, data sharing, and cutting-edge medical research. We affirm the importance of a One Health approach that connects the health of humans, animals, and our planet. And for this global approach to work, we need more transparency, more accountability, and more shared responsibility in the international system. COVID-19 has been a harsh reminder. No one is safe until everyone is safe. And it's why leaders from every region of the world have come together to propose collective action at international level. Immunization is a global public good, so we need to be able to develop, manufacture, and deploy vaccines as quickly as possible. And we also need to ensure universal and equitable access to vaccines, medicines, and tests. COVID-19 has exposed weaknesses and divisions across our societies. And now it's time to come together as one global community to build a pandemic defense for future generations that extends far beyond today's crisis. And for this, we must translate the political will into concrete actions, just like after the atrocities of World War II. Visionary leaders came together to build a multilateral model and to strengthen international cooperation. Today, more than ever, it's our responsibility as leaders to ensure that our pandemic preparedness and our global health systems are fit for the 21st century. Today, we are guided by a spirit of collective solidarity anchored in the principles of fairness, inclusiveness, and transparency. Let's work together to leave a legacy we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. Christian, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Director General. With this, we go over to the question and answers session. If you want to be put in the queue for questions, please raise your hand with the raise your hand icon. We'll start with the first on my list. That's Agnes Pedrero from AFP. Agnes, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, good morning, everybody. I will ask my question in French, if I may. La proposition de traité parle du principe d'accès équitable aux vaccins et j'aurais souhaité savoir comment rendre ce principe compatible avec le fait que de nombreux pays riches, notamment des pays européens, veuillent vacciner d'abord une large part de leur population. Une petite question pour le docteur Tedros. Suite à votre appel la semaine passée pour recevoir d'urgence 10 millions de doses de vaccins pour COVAX, est-ce que vous avez reçu depuis des promesses ou des propositions à ce sujet? Merci.
Director General. Mr. President.
Je vais répondre en français à la question qui porte sur les États membres de l'Union européenne. Quelques éléments tout simplement. D'abord, l'Union européenne a joué un rôle clé il y a plusieurs mois pour engager une pledging conférence afin de mobiliser des moyens financiers sans précédent pour soutenir la recherche et pour faire en sorte que très rapidement, en moins d'un an, différents vaccins puissent être développés. Deuxième élément, l'Union européenne a été engagée immédiatement pour soutenir cette initiative COVAX en partenariat avec le secteur privé afin de veiller à ce que l'ensemble des pays du monde puissent avoir accès à des vaccins. Et puis le troisième élément, la Commission européenne a montré il y a quelques jours le nombre de doses de vaccins produits au sein de l'Union européenne qui ont été exportées vers des pays en dehors de l'Union européenne. Ça montre bien que l'Union européenne est totalement engagée sur base de ce principe selon lequel personne n'est en sécurité tant que tout le monde n'est pas en sécurité. La bataille que nous menons partout dans le monde et en Europe aussi maintenant, c'est augmenter le plus rapidement possible les volumes de production afin de pouvoir délivrer et pouvoir administrer les doses de vaccins. C'est ça l'urgence, on est totalement mobilisé sur ce sujet-là. Et le thème qui est abordé aujourd'hui, cette idée d'un possible traité pour les futures pandémies vise à tirer les leçons de ce que nous avons vécu ces derniers mois, de ce que nous vivons encore aujourd'hui, afin de renforcer les capacités de coordination, de coopération sur le plan international dans tous les aspects. Une meilleure prévention, vous l'avez compris, mais aussi sur l'aspect de la capacité de déployer les médicaments, les tests, mais aussi les vaccins.
Director General, please.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, we asked for the 10 million doses as, you know, to fill the gaps we're facing in the near future. And we're already in discussion with some countries, and there is some positive signal. We will keep you informed. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. With this, we move to the next question. That would be Corinne Gretler from Bloomberg. Corinne, please unmute yourself.
Hi. Thanks for taking my question. I wanted to ask how such a treaty could possibly strengthen the WHO, like maybe would it give it more power? And if so, how? And then also, how would such a treaty be enforced?
Could I ask the President?
Yeah, we are convinced that such a treaty could be very useful in order to provide a clear framework for the international cooperation. There are many lessons that we need to draw after this crisis, and certainly one first point is the importance to exchange immediately information when we face the start of such a possible pandemic. One of the possible role for the WHO is to offer a framework for the cooperation in order to limit on the very short term the spread of the virus, but also to make sure that we can invest in the research in order to be able to deploy and to provide the vaccines, the medicines that we need in order to defeat the pandemic that we would face in the future.
Certainly, a framework that is being proposed in this treaty would provide WHO with a huge opportunity to partner at global level with our member states, with other institutions, with other multilateral entities, and to create a safer world by leveraging on all of the lessons we've learned, leveraging all of the partnerships we're currently building, and providing that long-term framework within which we can all work on surveillance, on supply chains, on production and equity for commodities, on health workforce, on so many other key pillars of what we consider to be a safer world through implementation of strong global health security measures. So in that sense, it would not empower WHO, it would create a framework within which WHO and its 194 member states could be more effective in doing the work we have to do to make the world safer. I would defer the question on enforcement to Steve Solomon, who's our legal counsel. But again, I think to re-emphasise, as the DG has, this is for the states of the world to come together and agree. We do not know and do not know what the final form of such a framework would be, of such a treaty. And again, it would be totally in the hands of nation states to bring together this process. We are here as a Secretariat to facilitate that process under the leadership of the Director General. Steve.
Thanks for that, Mike. So on the issue of strengthening WHO, as Mike said, the work that a treaty can do is to promote a whole-of-society, One Health approach. And with WHO's function as a coordinating and directing authority on health, this strengthens WHO as well as strengthening the partners in that whole-of-society, One Health approach. On the enforcement issue, a treaty, any treaty, has to be considered by each member state individually, has to be generally ratified by their parliaments. This engagement of each government in the elaboration, the negotiation of a treaty, as well as in its approval, is a way of promoting its implementation. Specifics about enforcement will be up to member states to decide on, but the engagement of each government in the work of creating a treaty, the engagement of each government in the work of approving a treaty, is a powerful tool in promoting its implementation and in whatever mechanisms countries decide should be included to address the very important issue of compliance and implementation.
Thank you. Just would like to add, recently we had a discussion with one colleague from one of the member states, and then he asked us, can you explain in simple terms what this treaty would add? I heard about some of the things in the concept note and so on, but I wanted to have it in very simple terms. So that was really a challenge. And I think we discussed about the challenges we're facing now very often, the challenges we're facing during this pandemic. So we presented to this colleague that way, the challenges we face and how that can resolve, how the treaty can resolve these challenges. And it starts from what President Michel said, the problems we face, for instance, in sharing information, the problems we face in transparency, in accountability. Then the other could be in sharing technologies. For instance, if you take the challenges we face, there is a problem in sharing information, so it can address that in sharing data. And then there is a problem in sharing the pathogen, and that could be addressed through the treaty. And there is a problem in sharing technology, or like vaccines. We are now confronted with vaccine equity. And this could also be addressed in the treaty. But I'm not saying these are the only things that the treaty will cover. Many aspects to strengthen the national capacity and to strengthen the global capacity too, because there is a challenge in national capacity. That's why we say we are as strong as the weakest link. So we should all support to strengthen countries who have weaker systems. And then the global capacity also, which depends on the national capacity, but at the same time, it has its own dimensions of global cooperation that we need to do. So if you see it from the challenges we are now confronted with, you can see how the treaty can add value. And after President Michel proposed this, and we had a discussion in Brussels, I remember in mid-December, We discussed around these challenges and how this treaty can actually address these problems. Thank you. And Christian, back to you.
Thank you very much, Director General and all. With this, we move to the next question, and that's Anne Gullen from the Daily Telegraph. Anne, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, thanks for taking my question. Yeah, I noticed on the list of world leaders, there were some notable exceptions. China and the US weren't included on the list that you sent out. And I just wondered, are you hoping to include those member states at some point? So can you just sort of talk a bit about how you're going to include everyone in on the treaty? Thank you.
Director General.
Thank you very much. This is a call from some leaders, but as you know, when the discussion on the pandemic treaty starts, all member states will be represented.
Thank you very much. And we move on to Stephen Erlanger from the New York Times. Stephen, please unmute yourself.
Thank you both very much. I'd like to just ask more specifically and directly, were the leaders of the United States, China, and Russia given the opportunity to sign this letter? And if so, what did they say? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll get to Dr. Mike Ryan, maybe. Oh, the Director General.
Yeah, so on the discussion on the treaty, we have had member states discussion. So mainly it's like an opt-in. Countries who are interested were flagging to join, but in some instances we were also inviting regional representation. It's based on anyone who would be interested to join, except the regional representation. But from the discussions we had in during member states session, the comment from member states, including U.S. and China, was actually positive, and we hope the future engagements will bring all countries. And as I said in my speech, you know, the countries who have now are calling doesn't mean that you know, they will, these countries alone will be continuing the dialogue. It's up to all member states, the 194, that will be discussing on the treaty. So few, even one or two or three or four, can issue an opinion or write an op-ed or can make a call. It doesn't need to be all 194 countries, but the next steps will be to involve all countries, and this is normal. So we don't need to have like all countries, 194, to be in the call. That will come during the actual negotiation. So I don't want it to be seen as a problem. It wasn't even a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this important clarification. And we'll move to Donatio Mancini from the Financial Times. Donatio, please unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for taking my question. Are you able to tell us more specific or concrete measures on production, manufacturing, intellectual property, or any other similar areas regarding vaccines that would be brought about by this treaty that have been floated in discussions or that you would like to see? Have you spoken to companies about the treaty at all? Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Donato, for this very simple question. Over to the Director General.
In the treaty, as I said, we cannot say this is in, this is out, because member states will start the negotiation. And we hope to have a resolution by May when the member states sit for the World Health Assembly. So anything that the member states would like to have to strengthen national capacity and global capacity, of course, they will consider. Thank you. But we hope it will address the challenges I already outlined, at least the 3 challenges: sharing information and sharing pathogens and sharing technology, sharing products, including vaccines. That's what we hope. But I think that will be for negotiation of all the member states. But if President Michel, if you would like to add.
Oui, merci beaucoup. En effet, ce que nous souhaitons, c'est que ce débat, cette négociation sur un traité soit un projet commun. Et nous espérons que l'ensemble des pays vont contribuer en étant engagés dans cette négociation et aussi en faisant partager les expériences qui sont le résultat de cette pandémie à laquelle nous avons fait face. Nous avons mentionné des exemples concrets de thèmes qui devraient être adressés dans un tel traité pour lequel une négociation, une discussion, un dialogue est possible. Je veux noter aussi, en lien avec la question précédente, qu'à la fois le pays qui dirige pour l'instant le G7, la Grande-Bretagne, et le pays qui dirige le G20, l'Italie, sont signataires de cette OPED. Et c'est évidemment une liste qui est ouverte, mais on voit qu'en quelques mois à peine, il y a un support important qui s'exprime, pas seulement au travers de l'OPED, mais également au travers des contacts bilatéraux que nous avons avec l'ensemble des nations dans le monde, y compris des nations qui n'ont pas signé cette OPED, mais qui ont un regard plutôt positif sur l'idée et qui sont prêts à s'engager. Un autre point important qui concerne la relation de partenariat entre les autorités publiques, les gouvernements, les organisations internationales et le secteur privé, notamment les entreprises dans le secteur pharmaceutique. Et certainement, il y a un sujet, il y a un débat pour la communauté internationale. Comment peut-on soutenir davantage de capacités de production afin qu'il y ait moins de dépendance et qu'il y ait plus de couverture partout dans le monde avec des capacités en termes de facilité, en termes d'industrie pour pouvoir produire et pour pouvoir délivrer. C'est notamment une question sur le continent africain. Il y a peu de temps, j'étais en Afrique dans le cadre de la mise à disposition des vaccins en lien avec le mécanisme COVAX et j'ai pu aborder très en détail ce sujet-là avec des leaders politiques africains qui sont prêts à être engagés sur le sujet. La Banque européenne d'investissement est prête aussi à analyser la capacité de pouvoir soutenir des efforts sur ce sujet-là et nous suivons de près aussi le débat qui a lieu au niveau de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce sur la question de la propriété intellectuelle et nous suivons avec intérêt cette proposition de 3e voie en lien avec ce thème-là, exprimée par la nouvelle directrice générale, Mme Gozzi, en lien avec ce débat qui va se poursuivre au sein de la communauté internationale dans les prochaines semaines, dans le cadre du traité peut-être, mais également en dehors du débat sur ce traité.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let's go now to the next on my list. That's Sophie Akadashvili-Rustavi from 2TV, from Georgia.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. My question is towards Mr. President Michel about political crisis in Georgia. Mr. Michel, what are your expectations and recommendations towards Georgia while the negotiation process is ongoing in Tbilisi? As a mediator, how do you think will the parties get agreement?
Mr. President, please.
I don't intend to express a comment this morning on this topic. You know that I've appointed a special and personal envoy, and he's working with the Georgian political parties in order to try to find a solution.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I think we move to the last question, looking at the time, and that will go to Jenny Leravello from DEVEX. Jenny, please unmute yourself.
Thank you for taking my question. A question for President Mitchell. In early discussions, have you discussed the inclusion in this treaty of specific wording in which countries commit not to hoard vaccines, especially in the event of another pandemic? And will you support that kind of wording in this treaty? And just the second one is, countries will decide on the enforcement of this treaty. One of the issues experts often say about the IHR is that it doesn't really have much teeth on enforcement and in getting countries to comply. So how do you make sure this pandemic treaty won't have the same issues? Thank you very much.
Dr. Mike Ryan, please.
Well, I'll actually give the floor to my colleague Jawad Mahjour after me, if that's okay, because it is important, and thank you for that question, because it is important to reflect the international health regulations is a really, really good instrument for countries to technically cooperate on building surveillance systems, but also on notification of events. This treaty is envisaged to be a much broader framework, taking in much larger slice of the pillars we actually need to do effective pandemic preparedness and response. It in no way undermines the IHR. It actually creates a much higher level of political engagement and commitment, and sustainable commitment, that will make the IHR as a legal instrument for global surveillance much stronger, and will increase the trust between member states. And we need trust. IHR only works if we have trust, if we have transparency, if we have accountability, if we have these things. We need that higher level of political commitment to the principles in the IHR. The IHR in itself is a piece of legislation. It is without meaning unless countries are fully committed to its implementation. Such a treaty would provide that impetus. It will provide that political framework in which we in public health can do our work much more effectively. Championing the IHR is a really important instrument of global public health surveillance, but by itself it does not work. Clearly, by itself it does not do the full job. As the DG said, this treaty or proposed treaty can address fundamental issues around global preparedness or lack of it, or national preparedness. It can address fundamental issues around trust. It can address fundamental issues around equity. It can address fundamental issues around collective responsibility and innovation for the future. Jawad?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. I would like just to add a few elements in this regard. The first one is the proposed treaty will definitely bring stronger political commitment and support for the IHR implementation. And previous IHR review committee concluded that the IHR is still a very powerful legal tool, but need more implementation. And this treaty may bring this political support and commitment to the IHR implementation. The second area, this treaty may cover some areas, some important areas in the response to pandemic who are not included in the IHR, like what the Director General said, virus chaining and some other extremely important and critical function and the response. Also, because to be part of the treaty, the state party will need to ratify it at the national level. And during this ratification process, we hope that the ratification process will create a mechanism and a platform for the whole government to come together to discuss about the future of preparedness and response to health crisis. We also strongly believe that all part of the society will come together in the ratification process to discuss the future of preparedness. And this dynamic is extremely important for better preparedness at the national level, and also good contribution to the global preparedness, because President Charles Michel and DG say that the world will not prepare if there is only one country is not prepared. Over to you.
President Michel, do you want to add?
Yes, thank you. I'm totally convinced that trust and transparency, it goes together. And such a treaty could help us to have more transparency. I will give you one very concrete example. The supply chains and the level of production. It was necessary in Europe the last days for the Commission to take some formal decision in order to try to have more transparency about the level of production and about the supply chains. I think that such a treaty could play an interesting role in order to make sure that we have more transparency. And if we have more transparency on the supply chains, on the level of production of vaccines, of tests, for example, that it will mean more trust and a better cooperation, an improvement of the cooperation among the countries in the world. Another concrete example, if you remember, at the beginning of the crisis, we didn't have all at the same time the same understanding about the seriousness of the situation. And that's why this question of the exchange of data is key in order to be able to act together, to take decisions together. This is another very concrete example. That's why we are totally convinced that we need this framework. It's very important that this treaty will be, I hope, a common project, and it means the support, but also the ideas and the concrete proposals of all the countries that will want to participate in this common initiative.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I understand our guests still have time for one more question. Shall we move to Stéphane Bussard from Le Temps Genève? Stéphane, please unmute yourself. Stefan, are you? Oh, yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, I think my question was slightly answered, but I was wondering how the articulation between this international treaty on pandemics and the IHR would work. How would that play out? Could you help me understand this articulation between the two? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Dr. Joad Majour?
Yeah, thank you very much. I will tackle the technical aspect and maybe Steve comment on the legal aspect. As I said, the IHR is a really very powerful legal instrument for preparedness, for alerts and sharing information on outbreak and epidemic and other health crises, and also for travel measures. The IHR, when it was designed in 2005, doesn't cover some critical element of the response, like President Michel said, the supply chain is not covered by the IHR. The sharing of the virus, the research and development, which is a key to discover and new countermeasures. And the treaty may cover this area to complement the role of the IHR as the legal instrument for preparedness and alert. For the legal perspective, Steve?
Thank you, Jawad. It's a very important area, the issue of coherence between any future treaty and the international health regulations. You've already heard about how important, how powerful a tool the IHRs are and remain and will remain. The IHRs themselves are rooted in the WHO Constitution. The IHRs were created by the World Health Assembly. The proposal here is for a new treaty also to be rooted in the WHO Constitution, to be created by the World Health Assembly, the 194 member states who compose the World Health Assembly. When the countries drafted the IHRs in 2005, they included a specific provision, I'll get very concrete here for a moment, a specific provision that called for the possibility of special treaties to facilitate implementation of the IHRs themselves. So indeed, this idea, this possibility of a treaty that could complement, could support IHR implementation was actually built into that regime. Very important for coherence between the IHRs and any future instrument, that it all works based on the principles contained in the WHO Constitution, principles of health for all, principles of non-discrimination.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, anything to add from your end?
No, thank you.
Thank you. With this, we'll be closing the press conference. Thank you all very much for participating, and I will start by asking President Charles Michel, our special guest today, for any closing remarks.
I would like to thank you again, dear Tedros, and also to thank all the countries that will participate in those negotiations and this political dialogue in order to make progress. And again, no one is safe until everyone is safe, and it's our duty to draw the lessons. And this is what we are trying to do with this proposal that we put on the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Charles Michel, and for the closing remarks to Dr. Tedros.
Yeah, thank you so much. And from my side, I would like to thank you, President Michel, for your vision and leadership. Thank you so much. And thank you also for all the member states, heads of states, and heads of government who have joined in the call. And as President Michel said earlier, during our member state briefings and bilateral engagements, many more countries are interested to push this agenda forward. And I hope we will have the treaty that will really change in how we respond to future pandemics. I think we need to hit the iron while it's hot, and I hope the world will choose to do that. And as what President Michel said, leave a legacy for our children. Thank you so much again, my friend, for your leadership, and look forward to working with you to make this treaty happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the comments, the initial comments by President Charles Michel and Dr. Tedros will be shared soon, and the transcript will be available of this press briefing as soon as possible today. Thank you very much.
durch grenzüberschreitenden Verkehr